the Rebbe asks a very, very powerful question. He says, why in the world, when we're talking about Moshiach, is the Gemara using a term for Moshiach that he's going to be a Kaiser? Kaiser means a king, but it's a Roman word. The Romans were the first ones who had Kaisers, which Kaiser is really Caesar. Moshiach is coming to fix what the Romans destroyed. Moshiach is coming to undo the Roman influence. For 2,000 years of darkness the Romans brought to the world. Destroyed God's dwelling, chased God away from you, brutally murdered the Jewish people and the greatest scholars. The bloodshed of the Romans is unforgivable. Moshiach is coming to rebuild the third temple. He's coming to end the exile associated with Rome. So why are we continuing and calling Moshiach's kingship with a Roman term? Why were the Romans emperors called Kaiser? And the Tosfos says, because the initial, one of their kings was born through a Caesarean. And because he was born an abnormal birth through a Caesarean, so number one, why are we calling Moshiach as a king? Why don't we call him by a Hebrew name? Secondly, the name that we're using is a type of king who's born through this abnormal process. That's the question. So the Rebbe gives a phenomenal answer. And the Rebbe says, take a look. He says, let's understand, why was the Roman king really born through a C-section? Why was he born through a Caesarean? Why wasn't he born in a regular way? So spiritually, obviously, the physical reflects the spiritual. When God creates the world, God creates, as we mentioned earlier, a certain system. And in the system, things evolve from higher to lower. Things are born. It's cause and effect. The cause gives birth to the effect, and then the effect gives birth to the next level. And so things work. But even a million causes and effects would not create something evil, because God is not evil. So the question is, how would something very, very dark and something vicious and evil, how does, God forbid, a wicked Caesar born that destroys the temple, fights God, destroys God's presence in this world, brings the entire world into darkness and into pain and suffering for thousands of years, and brutally murders God's children and causes unspeakable pain and suffering? How can that come about? For that reason, the Caesar was born through a C-section. What that means is that naturally, through the natural system of divine, godly cause and effect, it will never happen. It can go on and on and on and on, and such a monster would never be born. There has to be some kind of quantum leap. There has to be some kind of a complete disconnect. And that disconnect is expressed in the idea that the birth is an abnormal birth. The abnormal birth means it doesn't follow the system. And that's what enabled such evil to exist in this world. The Caesar and the Roman, whatever you can call them, the Roman Empire, that viciously brought such carnage and suffering. So that's a deeper understanding in the concept of why the Roman emperors, because else you'd wonder, if one of them was born through a Caesarean, why would that be so important to them to name their kings that way? Think about it. Why would they name their kings? Okay, named him that one, maybe they weren't all born through Caesarean. But why did they call them all that way? Because whether they understood it or they didn't, spiritually, the Talmud says, people say things even though they don't understand the meaning. So subconsciously, they understood that their existence is an abnormality in this world. The concept is not nature. Not nature means a miracle came about, but a very, very dark miracle. Usually we associate miracles for something wonderful and good. Here there's a super bad miracle that created the Caesar. How do you fix that? Who can fix and take such darkness, which was created through a miracle of darkness, an abnormality of darkness, that can only be fixed by a human being who is abnormally good and abnormally holy. For that reason, the birth of Moshiach himself is called also a birthing through a cesarean. For that reason, Moshiach is called Kaiser. But it's the opposite. The Caesar is born abnormally lower than everything. He falls below everything. And Moshiach is born and is elevated above everything, abnormally high. Reaches levels that is just impossible to reach. It's not like you can climb the ladder. You can climb the ladder to higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of connection. Moshiach is elevated by Hashem to absolute abnormal levels of holiness, of connection to God.